All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Prince George's County Public Schools Board of Education Climate Change Action Plan Focus Work Group for the May 19th, 2020-21 meeting. I would like to welcome all of the committee members and our special guests today. We have Council Member Tom Dernoga, and we have from the county the County Climate Action Commission, Don Hawkins Nixon, who is the chair of that commission. And we look forward to hearing from both of them later in our agenda today. So for the start of our meeting, we do have minutes to approve from April. I hope folks have had a chance to give a quick scan of those. And I would like to ask for folks to approve those minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any,
Aye.
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 any nays or abstentions? All right, great. Thank you so much. Next, we will approve today's agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Okay, great. Well, thank you. So moving into our agenda, I would like to once again recognize Kate Colzoni as our facilitator who helps us through these meetings when we need some points of order, clarification, or help in moving through our agenda. Thank you so much, Kate, again, for volunteering your time in that role. Once again, acknowledge Joseph Jakuda, who has been a lead partner to me in leading our parent climate action grassroots, and who has brought all of us together and produces our agenda and documents in between our meetings. So thank you again, Joseph, for your significant leadership role. So today's meeting is focused on legislation. And when we look at legislation, particularly today at the county and state level, and of course, the new exciting opportunity for the Climate Action Commission and how PGCPS aligns with that and collaborates. But I do want to say, I mean, I think like all of you, you can't look at a Twitter feed, you can't look at a newspaper without seeing the federal government messaging around legislation and eventually sending funds that will reach school systems, particularly on electric buses. And now I'm seeing more and more on green schools, leadership from Secretary of Education Cordona. This messaging has been like, we haven't seen it. You know, I'm not sure I recall ever seeing such positive messaging, but it's certainly not in the last 4 years. So it's an exciting time. And what I feel like I see a lot from legislation is, especially when it reaches school systems, that school systems need to be ready for those resources. If these are funded resources for change, and in this case, clean energy schools, electric buses, we need to be ready. And that's what we're doing over the next few months. We will have a plan, but in many ways, we need to think about our messaging and preparing to ask our legislators at different levels of government for support in funding those plans, and to be ready for where our legislators are a step ahead and saying to school systems throughout the state and out around the country, we want to see you implement these green technologies. So with that opening, I just wanted to do a quick pause to check with Kate or Joseph if there's any opening comments you would like to make before we move into the agenda, because Mary Lehman is up next, and I don't see that Mary's logged in yet. So we have a moment here.
Yeah, I'll just say, good afternoon to everyone. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I think the important part of this conversation is to really think about lessons learned from the past and how you apply it forward and create a strategy, a legislative strategy that will do what Pamela was just saying, be prepared and proactive and innovative in implementing the climate change action plan that you want to see for the county school system. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Kate. Joseph, any opening words from you?
One thing I was thinking is a little off topic, but I came from another conference right before this where they were discussing this collaborative project that's going on in California to link up environmental justice communities and state government in order to better the air quality. It's comes out of a law called AB 617. So it was really inspirational to hear that. And I feel like the work we're doing here is hopefully going to go along those lines, where we're looking at all the different groups in the community getting feedback. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing about the update on the stakeholder engagement later, and also how we're going to be able to hopefully collaborate with our state and county officials to make this happen.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Those lessons learned from other states are I think many of us are tracking those opportunities to see what can apply in the state of Maryland or even down to the county level. I'm still watching to see for Mary Lehman. If Mary does not log in the next few
Mary's
seconds.
here now.
Oh, great, perfect timing.
I'm okay. Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mary.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn on my video, but it's not cooperating. So I'm there.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. I am so sorry. I'm coming from a meeting at Riderwood Village. And if anyone has ever been there, it's an enormous retirement community not far from High Point High School. I've been there many times, but I parked kind of far away from the building where we were presenting. And then I was on foot looking for my car and was lost for about 15 minutes. And it was so frustrating. It's hot out. Finally, a resident said, "You look lost." I said, "I am. Can you help me find my car?" And he was very nice and he led me to my car. But so, yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. Am I going right into the presentation, Pamela?
Yeah, you're just like a second ahead of us announcing that David is going to launch a deck for us and for your presentation of the last legislative cycle, some of your thoughts on that and thoughts moving forward, and from your perspective as a delegate, how this work group can collaborate in the coming years. So,
absolutely.
Let me find it. Where'd it go?
And
also, as a
Pamela,
reminder, it's in board docs. So if you're using board docs to go through the agenda today, the state legislative review document is attached in there.
Pam, did you send me the PDF or did you just send me what was put on board docs?
Yes, just the PDF, if you want to launch that and can run through that for Mary, that's comfortable for you. I'm sorry, Mary, I think you're about to say something.
no, I just wanted to make sure I didn't need to do anything on my end. That was all. I'm waiting for David or somebody on that end to bring up the document. Is that correct?
Yeah, David's about to, there we go.
Open it.
Okay, I think, okay. I'm trying to, there we go. So I know I dealt with this there we go. Okay, I couldn't see the whole screen at first, but now I can. Okay, so thank you to Pamela and her wonderful group, the support staff, Joseph and others who really researched this and put this together, because I was very tight on time. So Yeah, if we could get started, that's a kind of the opening shot. Maryland General Assembly 2021 session in review. We have an overview, outlines the bills, those that passed and those that did not. So we can go ahead and start with those that passed. So next slide. There you go. Okay, so the emphasis in this whole presentation, if Pamela did not say that, is climate-related legislation with a very direct link to public schools in the state of Maryland. And so we're beginning with the amount of money that will be available for school construction in Prince George's, and which includes an emphasis on green features, renewable energy. Governor Hogan did veto this legislation, and depending on when he vetoes legislation, if we are still in session, we can come back and override a veto that session. If we're not, unfortunately, this is a big disadvantage. We have to wait till the following year. And that is what happens, unfortunately, and then you have this whole delay. And so we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about $25 million a year over 30 years for this new model of funding for the Built to Learn part of Kerwin, which is specifically school construction. So next slide. Okay, so you might think, why does this matter? The state has always been the biggest contributor to school construction, but we want to emphasize energy policy. And I have some colleagues, Jared Solomon from Montgomery is one of them, that have a great interest in public schools, public education, but also the nexus between public schools and energy, renewable energy, and reversing climate change. And so this bill, HB 630, that passed, requires us to address purchasing and conservation, energy efficiency, and that these plans be written focusing on renewable energy and updated every 3 years. So, and the long-term goal is, net zero buildings and eventually net zero or electric buses. Next slide. So another bill that passed, I did a run through with Pamela and talked about geothermal. Geothermal, interestingly, is a little bit controversial, and I'm not even clear on the reasons why. So this was a standalone bill addressing geothermal, Senate Bill H10, HB 1007, Feldman and Charkoudian, both from Montgomery, both really smart about energy policy. And basically what it does is say that a certain percentage of the RPS will come from geothermal heating and cooling. As Councilman Dernoga knows, there's only one school that I'm aware of in Prince George's. It's Vansville Elementary in our district that has geothermal.
You're welcome.
Yeah, credit Tom, and he got that building built. Tom Dernoga, good job, and really emphasized with PGCPS the importance of making that a green school. So that does have geothermal. There are some folks that aren't that fond of it. I am not clear on the reasons. I'm going to follow up and try to figure that out. Just briefly, there was a geothermal component in a bill you're going to hear about later, the Comprehensive Climate Solutions Act, and it did get taken out of there for reasons I'm not sure about, except that not everyone's a fan. So next slide. Again, we're emphasizing right now bills that passed. We will get to those that did not. Organic recycling and waste diversion, food diversion. This has become really a hot button issue. I think that, there are many people, and Delegate Charkoudian is, an expert also in this area along with energy, but many folks before the pandemic, I think, had valid concerns about food waste and the challenges of it, not just that we're wasting the food people could be eating, but the problems with waste and landfills. It seemed to be, get much more attention, deservedly so, during COVID. And so what this bill does is say that schools will have to start separating out organic food waste, and there are triggers, and it's by the ton. So there's a 2-ton trigger per week in 2023. and a 1 ton trigger, dropping by a ton in 2024. Pamela and I are going to follow up and find out where PGCPS fits in there. All we both know is that PGCPS creates a lot of food waste. We don't know exactly how much or where they would fit into this structure here. And then there's a waiver provision for, if schools cannot meet that. But this is a great bill. So next. The Safe School Drinking Water Act. Delegate Solomon worked with Delegate McCray on this. This is his second or third year. He's brand new like me, freshman delegate from Montgomery. And he's been trying to, he I think had his first bill addressing lead in drinking water in the 2019 session. In 2020, like a lot of bills that passed the House, and I think it got caught up in the Senate, but he came back with it this year. As the slide notes, it's not really directly related to energy use, but it's a really important, public health issue. It's also for the students and the faculty and staff that are in school 6 or more hours a day and need to drink the water. And so it will require by August of next year that schools take remedial measures on testing drinking water and making sure it meets this new lower threshold of 5 parts per billion, down from 20 parts per billion. Scientists say the evidence, the data are very clear that literally no exposure to lead is safe for children, none at all. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, next slide. Now the bills that did not pass. And Pamela and I and David again talked earlier today and agreed we want to emphasize, instead of getting into the weeds of why something didn't pass, often, and Tom will tell you this too, Councilman Dronoga, often as a legislator, you really don't know why something doesn't pass. You talk to people, they have philosophies, they have, their own sort of view, and it may or may not be true, or it might be only part of the story. So rather than emphasize the whys, we're going to talk about, what we can do better next time, what we can do in 2022. So the first bill, the electric school bus pilot program, HB 832, my colleague on ENT, David Frazier Hidalgo, we also call him DFH, another Montgomery County legislator. And David is a big supporter of electric vehicles, cars and buses. And it would have created a pilot program to encourage the utilities to partner with our school systems to use what they call vehicle-to-grid buses. And then members of the Prince George's delegation, I guess, were concerned that our school system would not take advantage of the program. And, sometimes, again, I don't know how well-founded that is. That certainly wasn't a concern of mine. The School Pedestrian Safety Act. When you talk about sidewalks, you think, who would be against sidewalks? Delegate Solomon, I remember him presenting this bill because everything transportation related comes through my committee. This bill, we are guessing, we do not know, but we're thinking the clock ran out over in the Senate because I cannot imagine opposition to this. On the synthetic turf and turf infill bill, I know a little tiny bit about that. That's because I have tried for 3 years to address this issue. I am absolutely not giving up on it. It's very important. It is a very serious solid waste issue. And why is that? Because a single turf field weighs tons with its crumb rubber infill. And so I've been approaching it as a waste issue. There are other folks that focus on it as a public health issue because the crumb rubber and other chemicals in turf fields are not, in fact, good for human health, not good for the environment. But I've been approaching it as a waste issue. This session, I had a really good bill, and I'm proud to say I actually got industry on board with it, which was, a huge feat. The synthetic turf industry ended up supporting it, not just not opposing it, but supporting it. It took a lot to get them to come around, but to their credit, they did. And the tire industry, which, as I said, they, are responsible for that crumb rubber that weighs the field down. They came around to it, could not persuade House leadership. So it did not move out of my committee. It was voted down in the Economic Matters Committee, unfortunately, because it was jointly referred. But I have told the Speaker's office I'm absolutely bringing it back next year, and I will probably get a Senate cross file. I'm talking to a few potential cross files. So I feel strongly about it. If you have any questions or, concerns or, any ideas on it, I'm open to your suggestions. So I think next slide. So why these matter, these bills, if they didn't pass? Again, if you talk to almost any legislator that sponsors these bills, if they feel strongly about it and they think it's a good bill, they will bring it back. That's kind of the refrain in Annapolis. There's next year. The 90-day session goes fast, and I have no doubt that these folks will be bringing these bills back. The Climate Solutions Now Act, another jointly referred bill. It was probably the environmental bill that got the most attention by, the environmental community, by the media, by our constituents in the 2021 session. I'm pretty sure there were a number of challenges on this bill. The first most disappointing issue that surfaced was that there were a lot of school provisions in this bill having to do with green buildings, requiring new construction, new schools to be solar ready. That those pieces got taken out initially by the Economic Matters Committee. But the word is, and I don't know if this is accurate across the board with all 23 jurisdictions in Baltimore City, but the argument was that a lot of school systems were not in favor of this. They thought it was either too aggressive, or they were I don't know who, were put out that they weren't consulted on the front end. And, that's always important, is that you want all the stakeholders in on the ground, whether they're with you or not. So I don't know if there was truth to that. But the school-related provisions came out first, and then other provisions were taken out or watered down. And so at the end of the day, the bill was still alive on sine die, the 90th day of session, but the House and Senate conferees could not come to consensus on it. And what I heard the very next day from my committee chair, Kumar Barve, as chair of House ENT, I don't know how Senator Pinsky feels, but Kumar made it clear that he thinks what the Climate Solutions Bill was intending to do, all very good things, will have a much better chance if those things are brought back as 3 or 4 separate bills rather than one big omnibus bill, which is what the Climate Solutions Now bill was. Very comprehensive, lots of goodies, a good bill, but maybe too much in it for one bill. So that will be the emphasis in 2022. The Climate Crisis and Education Act. This came to my committee. I actually pulled up the bill after I discussed it with Pamela and David, because I did not remember hearing this bill, but it was jointly referred to, again, Economic Matters and ENT. I think I must have been out that day or presenting my own bills in another committee, but it basically would have charged a fee on fossil fuels and would have generated $350 million, which would have gone directly into the Kerwin Fund. So I am familiar generally with the bill because I think it's been around a few years, but this year I am almost certain I did not hear the presentation. But again, David, my colleague, is very tenacious. He believes in this. I know he'll bring it back next year. Is there a next slide? Okay, next steps. So the bills that passed, I know will have, an impact on the climate change action plan. It's a matter of figuring out, how those are going to be, like with any legislation, how are those going to be administered? How are they going to be enforced? It sometimes takes agencies a little while to figure that out. So, the session just ended a little over a month ago. I think it's going to be, some time before all these agencies figure out how to carry out these bills. In some cases, the bills have not been signed yet. Governor Hogan signed a batch of bills yesterday. I was traveling from North Carolina and have not myself even had time to look at what he signed versus the bills that are still on his desk and that he has at least one more signing planned in the next, week or two. And I think there are a few hundred bills still out there. And then, what do we need to think about to be able to achieve the goals? Again, we have to be on the same page. And, it's hard to do in politics. It can be a bit like herding cats when you're talking about a big delegation like Prince George's. We have 23 House members and we don't all agree, obviously. But if it's a matter, I think, of 1 or 2 people disagreeing or having misconceptions about bills, we have to find out what those are. To go back to that one bill on one of the last bills we talked about with schools, and some of the Prince George's delegation, surmising that PGCPS might not like it or wasn't capable of doing it. Is there any truth to that? Is that just one person thinking that? Who did they share that with? We have to be able to, answer the questions, the concerns, the skeptics. And then consider how to push the Maryland General Assembly to support bills. People sometimes don't believe this. I think Tom would back me up. I don't know if Councilwoman Taveras is with us, but elected officials really do listen to stakeholders, to their constituents especially. But when they get phone calls, when they get emails, we want to hear from people, whether it's opposition or support, whether it's I like this, but ... I think a better idea, or I have an amendment. There has to be constant communication. And yes, we do need to be pushed. And sometimes there's a bill that somebody, might not be 100% on board with. But it might be maybe a little controversial, but they're looking for cover. So you got to push, stay in constant communication and absolutely push us. And, I have loved working with Pamela, and am looking forward to the continuation of this group. But we all have to stay in contact and share ideas and kind of cheer each other on. So with that, any questions, comments, or concerns? Or Pamela, I don't know how much time you built in for that.
Yeah, there actually is a little bit of time for questions. So I think I'll pass it to Kate to facilitate us through a couple of questions and timekeeping, if that's all right. And I think, David, you can bring down the deck so we could go back into our gallery view here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So let me just open up for any general questions or comments on what was just presented.
Okay, the journalist in me is going to tell you there are no dumb questions. So fire away, or even if it's just, what did you mean by such and such? Or I didn't catch that one point, or what did that one bill, what was it trying to do? Anything at all.
You have one question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Dawn.
Hi,
I'm
Dawn.
a mechanical engineer at PGCPS. And one of the things that I was looking at was about the Clean Water Act and helping to remediate the lead from the piping in the schools. One of the things that I had a question about with the funding with that is, how is it allocated? Because the thing with lead piping is not as easy in much older buildings to do it, to just, replace the piping system and move on. Usually when you replace that, there's a lot of other construction work that goes along with that. And it usually ends up in doing a full ADA upgrade to every bathroom in the facility.
Okay.
Along with updating fixture count. So if it turns out that the old codes said that you only need this many fixtures, but now, since you're doing this work today, you have to bring it to 2018 code, you have to add new toilets. So sometimes that could mean turning a closet or something like that into a bathroom, just so you can meet current code and get rid of this piping. Are those things in consideration with ensuring that the proper amount of funding will be allocated for projects like that?
So Dawn, that excuse me, is an excellent question. I don't have a short answer, but I can tell you a few things. Typically legislation, and I haven't, looked at this bill since it was before my committee a couple months ago, but typically legislation does not get into, I'm going to, for lack of a better term, say the weeds of how to administer it. And I doubt this does. I would be shocked if it did. So having said that, it is going to be up to MDE working with the school systems. And, I don't know, I'm sure there's been money in the past for this. I don't know how it was allocated, what types of formulas were used. If part of your question, if I understand it, is that would, for example, you address only certain, issues in, say you had X amount of money and all 205 or so buildings in Prince George's had issues, would you address at the very least all of the drinking water faucets, but maybe not get to other sinks? versus, whatever else, people are drinking, getting water from that could be consumed. Because I know you have some sinks that are just for hand washing and all that. Whether they would take that approach or address like the, oldest, schools in the worst condition in their entirety and address all fixtures all at the same time. I just don't know that. There probably is some history, but the other thought I have is that, and obviously there are never guarantees in politics, there is the hope, and it's gotten attention at the federal level, that if President Biden gets even part of his infrastructure bill passed through Congress, that, lead in drinking water, corroded and rusting pipes are a national problem, huge national problem that, everyone has known about for a long, long time. But of course, because of the horrible situation in Flint, Michigan, really kind of rose to the surface of everyone's, conscience, and people want to address it. So hopefully between the state bill and recognizing we have the problem in Maryland and the federal focus, we can get that done. But I can also follow up, or I can connect you to MDE, to my legislative liaison with the Maryland Department of Environment, because they have to start thinking about this.
No, you're right. Thank you. But you have the two major proponents of lead in systems are the fixtures and the solder that was used to actually bind the pipes together. So what you can go through the entire building, change your fixtures out, change out your water fountains, all of these things, and that's great. But then you still have solder that every time the water passes over it, it's picking up more lead, and it just picks up more every time it reaches another joint. So by the time it gets to the end, you still have lead.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that. I know that's a little, obviously worrisome, but I don't think literally, unless it's been so long, I don't remember. I'm not sure I've ever heard someone bring up the solder issue. So that is very useful to know. I know when I worked for Tom Dernoga in another lifetime, when I was staff to him, I was his education liaison, and that was from 2003 to 2007. And we had, for whatever reason, that issue was kind of, on everyone's mind at that time. There was a problem definitely in District 1 public schools in Laurel and Beltsville. And the solution at that time, or quasi-solution by PGCPS was, to turn off those taps, to shut off those fountains, put, tape across and signs like, don't drink from these. And then we put in the giant bottled, the Deer Park, which is, I guess, a solution short term, but it's certainly not, a long term or a good solution financially. So this is not a new issue, but there's much work to be done. So thank you for that.
I know Jamie Alston had a question as well.
Sure.
My question actually centered around thank you for your presentation and review, but it centered around the net zero schools. And I know that slide was, I just had it up. I don't remember the number, but it spoke about, I'm sorry.
Do you want David to try and go back, Jamie?
It's okay. I have mine up now, but I just don't have a number on it. But a couple of things that stick out for me. When I guess when this comes up again at future sessions, all new school construction would need to be solar ready. There needs to really be an exhaustive understanding of what solar ready means, and the partnership with our utilities, because they tend to need to know well in advance of the design stage of what we are planning, because solar ready means they have to go and research and make certain that there's enough, not only infrastructure, but enough of the zoning allowed for solar.
Right. So that's a good point. I think that did get end up being taken out of the bill relatively early on. I think in that first go round of amendments by Economic Matters, I think that came out early in the process. Other school related changes came out toward the end, so that at the end, by the time they had the bill that was trying to be hammered out right up until almost midnight, literally at 11:55 on sine die. Both the House and Senate conferees gave up and said this is not going to happen this year. But Solar ready, my understanding is it just means, and I'm not saying this is insignificant, but it means that the building is designed architecturally to support solar panels. It's not a zoning issue because I think in very few instances, I'm not saying it would never happen, but I don't think the bill intended, it doesn't rule out, but it was not written in a way that intended for there to be solar panels on the ground. The only time, and you can have solar panels, for example, up in our district, and you're seeing these more and more. We have a building on Schweitzer Lane that's got a parking lot that's got solar panels that cars park underneath. But I don't,
To see.
correct me. Yeah, Tom can correct me if I'm wrong. He is far more well-versed and expert really in zoning. But I don't think that example on Schweitzer Lane, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, was a zoning issue, was it? Was that a problem, or did they have to get some kind of zoning approval for that?
I don't recall ever seeing any zoning approval required for it. It's a commercial property. They might have had some design issues or site plan issues, but not any kind of zoning approval. And was that, no, that's not the best, that was the bank building.
Yes.
A long
Yeah.
time ago. But the school system, any government property does not have zoning requirements.
Okay.
Okay.
The reason why I mention it, because it comes up, a lot. I hear what you're saying. It comes up a lot with our utilities. And I was on some FEMP webinars last week, Federal Energy Management with the federal government. And they have some plans that are in place that have to be in place by October 1st, I believe it is 2022. One of the things that came out of that session was that early notification with the utilities as well as the loads. There's a difference between submitting a load in a Class A application for a utility without solar versus a load submission if you're planning solar. It's a difference in what is going to be powered in the school.
Okay.
That's something for later.
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot to learn on that front, so thanks for sharing that, Jamie.
And then the other part was with the net zero school loan fund. I know that we were talking about a new net zero school for new Glen Ridge Middle School. And I believe that's in its design stage now. So would we pretty much, I guess, miss out on that loan if the design is being submitted now?
Not necessarily. If we pass this next year, you wouldn't. And because school construction is done in phases, and first there's the planning, and most of it is certain chunks of funding the state approves in advance, but others the county has to pay for and then seek reimbursement. So I would not say that's necessarily the case. I think there is a lot of, we won't know until the 2022 session, but I think there is a lot of hope and optimism around getting these provisions passed, as I said, and maybe as 3 or 4 separate bills, but I would not give up hope on that. But I can follow up and talk to you offline about it and ask some other people their opinion about that. I'm not familiar with the school you mentioned. Where is that?
That is in almost like Landover Hills, Maryland area. Are you familiar? The southern area, almost near Bonnie John's.
Okay. Yeah, my grandparents, I grew up in Greenbelt, my grandparents live right behind Capitol Plaza. Is it near that area?
Not too far from there, but closer more to the Bonnie John's area than.
Okay. I have not heard about this school in particular, but I would love to talk to you more offline. And
it's right near Glen Ridge Elementary School, not too far from there. It's going to be the new middle school.
Okay.
I think it's interesting. I think what people are bringing up is the importance of technical definitions and legislation, and perhaps the importance of sequencing and an incremental approach. I know Don Bell had something he wanted to say as well. Don?
Yes, I had a question about the geothermal bill that passed. It says that a certain percentage of the state's renewable portfolio standard has to come from geothermal. I'm interested in how that breaks down by jurisdiction. What percentage of that needs to come from Prince George's County? And then how do we, how are we ranking with this percentage as it stands now? I know that Jamie and Don updated us in the chat on some of the additional schools that have geothermal, but I'm interested in seeing that data in terms of what percentage, does Prince George's County need to contribute? How does that compare with the schools that already have geothermal now? And then how does that compare with new school construction and what's being planned?
Okay, and Donald, I will have to follow up with you on that. Again, my best guess is, not having looked at that bill recently, that it's not going to, those details will not actually be in the legislation. I'm guessing the Maryland Energy Administration will sort of flesh that out in regulations. But happy to follow up. I, told Pamela just this morning, I'm really intrigued now because it only came up at the very end of session when the last time the Environment and Transportation Committee saw the Climate Solutions Now bill, which briefly had geothermal language in it. And then it was, Delegate Barve announced to us it had been stripped out because he didn't name the school systems by name, but he said some of the school systems objected to it. They didn't like it. They had concerns about it. Don't know who he was referring to. And he said, look, I get it. I've been pushing geothermal for years, but not everyone likes it as much as I do. I don't know what that's even about. That was news to me, but I'm happy to follow up on that because you're right. We always say, with legislation, the devil is in the details, but often those details, Valerie Irvin knows this too, often those details are not actually in the legislation. They are to be determined through regulations and rulemaking, we call it. And so, and almost always that I can't think of an exception, regulations and rules are put out for public comment. So they do seek input. It's not like these agencies are going to write these, rules in stone and say, here they are, make them work. There's a whole process, but I can follow up with you. Absolutely. And even connect you to, the agency people, the bill sponsors, whatever you need me to do.
I think we have a question from Michael, last one.
Sure.
Yes. I'm actually going to raise my hand. We were talking about the solar and the net zero, and since you mentioned the geothermal, and I was asked the question, and maybe you alluded to that maybe sometimes the bills are, I don't have deliberately right, written a little vague because the comment solar ready is vague because it doesn't say, well, the 20% of the electricity generated for the school has to be by solar.
Right.
But just to, then a comment, and then we were discussing net zero and geothermal. And quickly, let me give you some history. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when lead was everything, and then was lead silver, and then lead gold and lead platinum. It was a big difference in the cost of construction because it was new. So everybody, everyone thought that these goals were, some of them are bridged too far because of cost. But once the knowledge base, improved and it got incorporated in design, it became less and less costly in terms of incremental cost of a building to implement these measures. So now even to get lead, depending on the type of building, to get lead, silver, or gold, it really is not much incremental cost in building the building. Now net zero, I look at, as the next level, and attaining net zero, is not easy, and it would probably need a combination of not only efficient systems, but probably alternative energies there, whether you have partial solar, some geothermal. But if they're eventually as the technologies evolve, even with geothermal requires a lot of real estate, but compared maybe to the size of the building to do all down the ground stuff, but sometimes it could be below the parking lot. The solar canopies, which we have here at Bowie State, we have now 2 solar canopies and about 5 roofs, and then a ground mount. We have over 2 megawatts of power. But when I started along this road, it was, there was some skepticism, and then once it started happening, then it became more and more easy. And the last point, coming back to this, with solar, because of the prices keep getting less and less.
Mhm.
It's becoming, it's becoming more and more attractive. I don't like to define alternative energy and just look at it as cost, because we have to also not talk about cost, but cost about lessening the environmental impact. If we focus just on return on investment, a lot of times you might lose the argument. At the front of the argument has to be reducing the environmental impact. It just can't be frame it in terms of cost. It's hard to win that battle alone sometimes. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And say sometimes, although you can't quantify it, the question that I think we need to all ask on a lot of issues is, what is the cost of not doing it? And it's not there's not an easy answer, but I think what we're trying to do, it matters. It really matters. One other quick thought, Jamie. I thought a little bit further about your zoning question. The only energy issue that, believe it or not, that comes before my committee, all of the other energy issues, fossil fuel and renewables, all go to the Economic Matters Committee. It's just a jurisdictional issue. It's kind of odd, but we do deal with solar in my committee. The one challenge around land use, where it's the most sensitive, is in rural areas where there is a lot of tension between the agricultural community, some farmers, not all, and preservationists that want to see open space and farmland preserved, and they don't want to see solar panels on top of it. And so there is, tension, and there are disagreements there. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all in our area, but I think Tom was right to point out, which I didn't think of, when you're talking about schools, you're talking about government, or publicly owned property. So zoning rules don't almost never apply. I can't think of an instance where they do, but again, I think the bill is mainly envisioning rooftop solar. Oh, there's Denny. Hi there, Denny Tavares. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hi, dear.
Good to see
Denny,
you.
right on time, Denny.
Hey, guys. I can't stay very long, but I want to say that, I don't know, did you guys just finish talking about Bill, I believe it's HB 1006, about the geothermal bill?
Geothermal?
The geothermal bill 1006?
Yes, we did. We were talking about that, yes.
Okay, so I helped get it through. It was real tough. Unfortunately, for whatever it's worth, our state senator was trying to block it. But anyway, we do believe that there are some benefits to color. This was a bill that was supported by all the unions, that was supported by, it's basically creating a new market and expanding the market for geothermal, which is exciting, and creating a significant incentive for geothermal to be used in communities like Bladensburg, Langley Park, etc. So this is really exciting news. These are great opportunities. This is an opportunity, given that construction is such a high percentage and HVAC work is such a high percentage of economic breakdown of how people make money in this region. We're about 30 to 35% of that is in this district alone. That's an incredible opportunity for people who want to basically learn. And I just finished speaking when the bill was about to pass, or when we were negotiating for the passage of that bill. I spoke with Jonathan Bolden, who owns a union-backed, or it's a union shop HVAC legacy company, family owned. And he would say totally that he was all in on making sure that his staff would be prepped and ready to go on and expanding to this new marketplace. So, I mean, he was very excited about it. So, and if this is somebody who's in the industry, is out there, who's obviously doing work within PGCPS currently, I don't see why not. We cannot support a bill such as this. So with that, I will, I'll say, do consider it. I know there may be some hiccups here and there, but I think it's also part of the evolution. When solar first came out, there were issues, but now over time they've eased and improved in the marketplace. And that's the same thing that's gonna happen with geothermal. So I think that we're excited to hear and see that.
Yeah, I didn't know you had worked on that bill. If you could stay with us for a minute. Donald did have a question that I was unable to answer about the standalone geothermal bill. I talked a little bit about the geothermal provision that got stripped out of the Climate Solutions Now bill. But I wanted to make another quick point before he re-asks his question, which is that, we need to do, more about addressing existing buildings and retrofitting existing buildings. I had a bill with Senator Rosapap, speaking of HVAC systems, that one of the labor unions approached us with, the Insulators Union, which is right here in my district, in Tom's district, in Laurel, in the city of Laurel, Local 24. And they asked us to put in an economic tax incentive bill for existing buildings to, it's mechanical insulation. So to insulate, HVAC system pipes that go in and out of buildings, because it's a major loss of energy where air escapes from buildings and then outside air, hot or cold air, comes into buildings. These are older buildings that maybe had the insulation at one time and it's disintegrated, or they were never properly insulated to begin with. And they can realize it's like a win the whole way around. It creates jobs, it lowers energy utility bills, and it's good for helps with climate change, helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The bill, I have the House bill, Jim had the Senate bill. It didn't even get out of committee. So we have to be thinking along those lines as well about our existing buildings and what we can do, because most of our schools are existing. They're not new. We're building new buildings. We have a big challenge there.
And if I remember correctly, there was also, I'm also chair of CIPSE, the Climate, Energy, and Environment Planning Committee out of COG. So we were supporting 1006. We were supporting also the bill by, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Wilkins or Lorig, who have put in a bill for retrofitting older buildings, green infrastructure.
Right.
So those were also a couple of bills that also got a little ahead, but it didn't make it through. So as for me, what was the question?
Donald, do you want to re-ask your question that I was unable to answer?
Yeah, so my question in looking at the information, it says that a certain percentage of the state renewable portfolio needs to come from geothermal. And so I was interested in how does that break down by jurisdiction? What percentage of the state's portfolio for geothermal needs to come out of Prince George's County, so that we could then start to look at as a school system, what are we contributing to that percentage, and how does it need to increase?
Well, I don't think we've got the answer to that, frankly, at this point, because truth be told, we have a climate action plan, a climate change commission study, that report that was done, but it's very high and superficial, and it doesn't dig in deep, right, into these kinds of issues, in my opinion. And I think that as we break down, that's why everybody's essentially doing their own climate action plan to figure out what they can do inside their personal jurisdictions and within their own scope. Because at this time, I think that everybody's setting goals. And we have the climate action plan that we have. So right now we have Councilmember Tom Denoka could speak to what he's working on now with regards to his climate action plan. Montgomery County has one. That Frederick County has one. So So I think as we create a bigger picture of how we're going into detail, and I also have some other ideas of what I'd like to do, not just through council, but actually outside of council. Those are things that I'm working on in terms of that. I don't know, Tom, do you want to speak to the climate action plan?
Oh, that's why Dawn and I
Great
are here.
transition. Yep,
We're
great.
next.
Great
I wanted
transition.
to make a note on geothermal, which is great. But I'm not an engineer, but from the geothermal systems that I'm familiar with, you got to use electricity to run the cooling system. So you may have a need for solar panels to offset the electrical. You're going to save tremendous on the heating costs and have a great greenhouse gas reduction, but you do have the electrical component. So you might want to do both. So just keep that in mind.
All right, well, this has been a great discussion, and Mary, thank you so much for all that you do in Annapolis and for bringing us this information and giving us a chance to make all these connections and what the work ahead is. And I want to give a shout out to Don Holton and Jamie Alston for keeping it real for us to really understand these impacts on PGCPS and the folks who implement. I know that as a board member, I'm like, why can't you just do it? And Don and Jamie, so great that you're just bringing this information to us and reminding us that we do know how to do geothermal in this system. We do know how to do solar. Like we're moving ahead. But Denny, thank you for making the connections to future workforce. That's also part of what our work group mission is to make those connections to the workforce, and then what PGCPS curriculum should include in the future. So thank you for that. And I think now like to transition to the county council's climate action commission. And Dawn, are you going to present, or are you going to give us a report, or do you have something to post?
Yes. Can I project my screen, share my screen? I think I can. Let me try from here.
Yes, you just got permission. And Tom, if you would like to make any opening remarks about the commission or join with Don, I'll handing it over to the two of you.
I'll just say that the county council, last year created this commission. We set as the chair of the commission, the director of the Department of the Environment. Mr. Gill left, Dawn got promoted, and she's the commission chair. I'm the county council's representative. And Mr. Bell is your representative and doing a great job. And the only other thing I'll note, and I'm going to let Dawn take the lead as the chair. In our education and outreach subcommittee, we have 3 subcommittees. Education is about educating the public from our standpoint. First of all, about our creation of the plan, and then about after the plan's adopted, the implementation, and et cetera. And a lot of the folks on that subcommittee were talking about nonstop about, well, the school system should do this, the school system should do that. And we decided maybe we should let your group decide the school issues. But I think we probably wanted to at least he maybe get a presentation from you at some point as to where the school system is going to go with its ideas. So we're glad to be here and share what's going on with the commission as a whole, but we'd probably like to hear from you guys. I think it would benefit our commission to hear what the school system is doing. With that, I'll let Dawn do her presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Denoga. I'm hoping everyone can fully see my screen at this point. Yes, okay, wonderful. So I do want to thank you for inviting Department of the Environment and me in particular, serving in the capacity of chair to the Climate Action Commission to participate in your meeting this afternoon. Let me advance, there we go. So, I always tend to want to open my meetings with potential partners with just a sense of my perspective on climate change, global warming, climate change, and just protection of the natural environment in general. So generally my position is we only have one Earth. It's vast. We have many natural resources that abound, but those resources are finite. And many times we forget that, right? Because we see those resources everywhere. And sometimes, you know, some things you don't miss until they're gone or severely damaged. So it is incumbent upon each of us to look to ways to protect and preserve our resources for our own health and for future generations. And on the front of global warming, climate change, the Prince George's County Climate Action Commission has been charged with developing a plan to prepare for and build resilience to regional, not only county, but regional climate change impacts and to set and achieve climate stabilization goals. So to that end, we truly look forward, the county truly looks forward to working with Prince George's County Public Schools on that climate action planning process that has started but will continue for many, many, many more years down the road. I do want to acknowledge my department. I always have to give that Department of the Environment recognition and appreciation for the opportunity for me to participate in the Climate Action Commission and to share my background in flood management and also act in the capacity of chair for the Climate Action Commission. So, Council Resolution CR 7 2020 established the Climate Action Commission for the purpose of developing a climate action plan for the county. So that was the impetus for this climate action planning process that we are currently in the midst of. CR 7 2020 requires a greenhouse gas emission inventory and establishment of emissions reduction goal for the county. Also, this plan purposely requires that we commit a section to address adaptation. We recognize the fact that climate change has started. For all who are living in this area, you know that we had probably the highest number of days above 90 degrees last summer. We've experienced flash flooding multiple times over the last 5 years or more. It's happening more frequently. And that is indeed an indication that the climate is changing. So not only do we have to take measures to reduce those greenhouse emissions, to protect ourselves from further exacerbation of conditions that will lead to worse climate change impacts, but we also have to deal with the fact that we have conditions that we have to start adapting to now, or at least planning to adapt to going forward. The climate, by the county establishing a climate action plan with these specific requirements for greenhouse gas emissions, reduction and adaptation measures, and with the requirement to deliver a draft plan, a plan to the county council by September 30th, 2021. This resolution has indicated the urgency of a climate action plan. I mean, we have a time frame of about 1 year to get a plan in place. Some would say it's way too aggressive, but if you think about it, we've lost time in not having a plan in place. The longer we take to get a plan in place, we're further behind. So I think the schedule
is truly aggressive because action is needed now to address climate impacts, which we're already seeing. And in addition, by having a plan in place, position ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities that the Biden administration is making available to communities throughout the country. So we really want to have a plan in place to say, hey, yes, we can take advantage of this funding because we have a path forward for applying those funds. I'm sorry, did I hear someone with a question or no? No, okay. So I will continue to the next slide. So this slide pretty much tells us, conveys where we are in terms of the Climate Action Commission's planning process. So we're somewhat a little bit beyond that midpoint for the plan development. We've gone through the initiation of the plan. We've worked with our community, with the commissioners, with our technical support staff to identify those actions, those possible actions that we need to take in order to reduce our emissions, in order to prepare ourselves to adapt to the changing climate and to become a more resilient community. So at this point, we've come to a set of actions that the commission may put forward in our plan to start that process of driving down greenhouse gas emissions and also start the process of preparing ourselves to adapt and to become more resilient to the changing climate. Now, there's much more work to be done. After the commission has come to an agreement on our top action items, we will have to flesh out those action items and present those action items to the community for their input, for their, whatever questions or concerns or other ideas that they may have. And then we move forward to actually developing the plan and reviewing the plan and then putting ourselves in a position where we're ready to deliver a draft plan to the county council for their consideration. So when we think about these action items, what should we do? How do we get to where we know we need to go, to where we need to go? We have, as a commission, we've decided, yes, more or less, that we need to align our action plan with the regional plan and with the state plan, right? We have to work our way in and under those similar strategies that you find in the COG, Climate Energy Action Plan, and the MDE, resiliency plans and mitigation plans. Because when we align ourselves with the region and with the state, then we're in a better position to take advantage of what the state offers. We're in a better position to take advantage of what's happening regionally, and we're in a better position to help the state in the region identify the progress that is being made towards emission reductions and then towards improving resiliency and adaptation. So the county is making that deliberate effort to try to ensure that our action items align with state and regional strategies, more or less. The actions might not be exactly the same, but they're aligning with similar actions in those higher level plans. So in thinking about development of a climate action plan and considering that the school system is within Prince George's County, I think it would be very helpful if the Prince George's County Public School System also considers aligning with that COG plan in general, taking a look at the state's mitigation plan and adaptation plan, and trying to ensure that you're not deviating too much, that you're kind of falling in alignment, right? So that we're all kind of working together along the same, pretty much the same paths to reach the same end goal. We also recommend that you pay particular attention to the terminology and the definitions that you use in your plan. We have made that effort to use similar terminology and definitions as are used in the COG plan, because it just makes communication a lot easier across the board. And it will also allow you to see where you fit in with the county plan, with the COG plan, and with the state plan, if you're using similar terminology.
Don, in your plan, do you highlight legislative strategy?
We do have an action item. Well, we do have an action item that we're working on that will address legislative strategy, more or less, yes. And again, our action items are still under development. They're not fully blessed yet, but we do try to take into account the legislation that has been put forth at state, local, federal level.
And in order to ensure alignment and consistency in terminology and definitions, are you able to share your work in progress with this team? So they're able to leverage the good work you all have been doing?
Sure, I think that, yeah, I'm pretty sure we should do that. Yeah.
Well, I think that'll be easier after Friday.
Yeah, I think it will. Yeah,
We
Friday's
have our
a
next
big
commission
day.
meeting on Friday, and we're going to make a variety of action item decisions according to Dawn.
Yeah, quite a few. So Friday is a big day for us, but we'd be more than happy to share with you our work today. And I do, go right ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, that's great. That's, but I was interrupting you, so go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So I do want to just point to how we arrive at the priority actions. We did employ or are employing an evaluation criteria system to establish our priority actions. So many of our priorities initially came through brainstorming sessions. The commissioners brainstormed about potential actions in our working groups. We did have 3 working groups, as Councilmember Denoga described. We had the mitigation working group, adaptation working group, and the outreach and education working group. So each working group was challenged with coming up with action items that could move eventually to those priority actions to be included in the climate action plan. We also received
suggestions from the public via community engagement meetings, via our virtual open house. And we have a new website, climatepartners.org, I believe, where visitors can just share their thoughts about climate action planning in Prince George's County. So this brainstorm list, it is our master list. And then we've tried to refine that list through the evaluation scoring, which I'll show to you in the next couple of slides. Ultimately, we are trying to arrive at a priority list of action items, anywhere between 10 and 25 action items, right? So that actual number of priority actions, we have not yet fully defined and blessed at this point. But again, Friday is a big day, but we do know that we want to have a manageable set of priority action items.
Dawn, I think this is in part where we can answer Pamela's questions. Some of those action items will require legislation. Some will just require implementation.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that we make some decisions about things that require legislation, that would be stated in the plan that we need to then take the next step.
Yes, absolutely. So just to give you an idea of the evaluation criteria, one of our commissioners recommended that we take a two-tier approach to evaluating potential actions, priority actions for the plan. Now, tier 1 criteria specifically speaks to control, right? The sphere of control. What's in control of the county? And also it speaks to the readily available technology, right? Sorry about that, forgot to turn off my phone. It also speaks to readily available technology, right? Is technology available to make, in order to move these actions forward? It speaks to time, right? We as a commission, one of our principles is to deliver a plan that's timely in terms of the actions that we can put forward. Will the actions take 10 years, 15 years to fully implement? Some actions might, but the priority actions should be implementable within 3 to 5 years, right? So we look at time as a criterion. We also look at the bottom line in terms of how the implementation of the action will move us closer to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then the other tier 1 priority action refers to whether the action will yield benefits to underserved communities, because we do realize that many of our underserved communities will be hardest hit and are perhaps and the least have the least ability to fully rebound from some of the impacts of climate change. And then going to
John, will you make this presentation available for everyone?
Sure. Yep.
I want to be mindful of time. We have about 8 minutes left.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, this is really important information. So I'm glad you're doing it. That's why I want to make sure everyone gets access to it. And then, but we need to do a few more things on our agenda before we close up, and we want to make sure that we're honoring everyone's time. So
okay,
Pamela.
That's no problem. So tier 2 criteria, it speaks to the added benefits. So I won't go through those criteria one by one. And then this slide just tells you more or less how we score the criteria.
in order to move from tier 1 to tier 2. We're looking at those potential priority actions that have at least a score of 7, right, from at the tier 1 level. And then we will work through to further whittle down actions to that 10 to 20 range through the tier 2 criteria, application of tier 2 criteria. And again, this is just the next step. After we identify those priority actions, we will move to the next step to develop blueprints. Some people call them strategies, which will just outline how we implement an action. There will be other items highlighted in the blueprint, but when we talk about blueprints, we're looking at the strategy, the course to move forward with the action item. And with that, I do want to share that we have a Climate Action Commission meeting on Friday at 1 o'clock. You can view, listen in on the meeting by going to the County Council website. The link is posted there. We invite everyone to join in, listen in. It's from 1 to 3, again on Friday, May 21st. And then our second community meeting will be on June 24th at 6:30. So we'll make more information.
Please help us on outreach.
Yes, please definitely help spread the word about that community meeting. And if I guess that's all for me. If there are any questions, or I will definitely share the PowerPoint so that you can share it with your stakeholders as well.
I had one point to make that I think would be important to understand, because Dawn's been very adamant about this, and it's one of the things that some of us commissioners didn't get at first. We started with about 75 potential action items. And as Dawn said, we're trying to pare it down to 15 to 25. But two things, some of those 75 are going to be combined together, so that 15 to 25 will actually be more than 15 to 25. And the other point that Dawn has made is that the ones that didn't make the cut, we're talking priority. Those probably will need to be done in time, but just since we're focused on the next 3 to 5 years, these are not the ones that will be first on the list. So we will be getting to the entire list at some point over the next 10, 15 years. That's an important thing for us to remember. Something as you look at your priorities, you can't do everything at once.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know that seeing how you're organizing and thinking about this and the recommendations to our work group are incredibly valuable, and the timing is, I feel like the timing's perfect as we begin to move into our discussions where we're going to start to identify some of these actions and goals. And I know that I will be studying, I'll be studying everything that you send to us to make sure we find those alignments that make the most sense. And one of our student members, Asia, just had to take off, but she was about to, we were going to have her announce our student town hall, which is our first stakeholder engagement, tomorrow evening at 5. And I do know that we want to honor where students are thinking what is important to them. And I think that could be one area that will come together and might, are those alignments there around, I think, the advice you were just giving. And, we want to make sure that the students have their hands on what they're most passionate about. So we'll look forward to reporting out and coming together as Councilmember Dernoga, as you said earlier, it's time. This is the first step in us bringing this all together.
We need you to send as many students as possible to June 24th.
Oh, we just went through a marketing thing for ours. So I think we have a lot of lessons learned and can be very helpful with that.
Great.
Absolutely. Love to. Yeah, thank you. So Kate, do you want to move us quickly through a couple more items here?
So I think we just need to put the guiding principles up as we move into some of our some decisions and housekeeping items. So these guiding principles were sent to you a few weeks ago, and there was some gathering feedback in your review. We did get some feedback, and we spoke with those that engaged on the conversation. Does anyone have any issues with how the guiding principles are outlined, or is there any guiding principles that are missing that we should be including for the process? Okay, does everyone agree with the guiding principles as they're outlined in the document that's shown and is also on board docs and was sent to you over email?
All right, sounds like we're not hearing any recommendations for change. So I guess right now I'll ask if there's consensus for this to be our guiding principles that we all continue to look back to as we take next steps in this process.
Okay, I just have a question. Should there be something in there about health and safety, or is that inferred in the science?
I think I'll ask anyone would like to make a reflection on that. I think it's a great point.
I agree, it's a great point, and much when you look at buildings now and evaluate buildings, healthy buildings is really a part of it. I think Harvard did a lot of studies and has contributed a lot of data regarding healthy buildings, which would encompass air quality, especially coming through COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. So perhaps that would be an excellent suggestion to include somewhere.
Would you consider that part of being driving a positive impact, or?
I would consider it driving a positive impact. If you have a healthy building, from our standpoint, as it relates to instruction, then you have more of an opportunity to increase a good learning environment and an experience. And if it's a healthy building, then hopefully it's performing well building envelope wise.
But not only in terms of the building itself, but the environment around it too.
Correct. The healthy building takes in consideration environment.
Right. So because one of the things that I've been asked to work on is there is a document, a government document that we can actually use to justify some of the things that we're doing that is actual national policy, which is not used for building, construction, or anything else, but it's used for other things like research when they're considering how they how you study certain I guess you could say well, people, because they don't use it for animals, but for people. So and they deal with a lot of that health issue related. So that's why I'm thinking ahead of what I have to do more so than in general.
Well, I think I would take that as that we could add health and safety in, but it's sounding like there's no objections that adding health and safety will just strengthen this and be clear to our constituents that we're putting health and safety as a priority. Is that, did we move forward with that is the plan?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I had one other thing to add. Now that that was mentioned, when you think about safety, it makes you think about SEPTED, which is your design, your safety design of buildings. So I don't know if that's too much, if we're going too far out, but when you mention, safety, then you can't help but, or I can't help but think about SEPTED And that came up this morning in an ASBO meeting yesterday and today. Your environmental, your safety design. And when you think about active shooters, when you think about a whole lot of things inside, when you think about students that have an opportunity to be assaulted or molested in a school building, and thinking about that safety design, that was the discussion yesterday and today.
All right, thank
So
you.
maybe too much, but not wanting to, but just wanted to just share.
No, definitely appreciate that. Well, if it's all right with everyone, we'll just we'll repost this. We'll put this in our meeting minutes and then have the final reposted for next month. But it sounds like everyone should start to take these in and really think about them as we move through the process, and we'll refer back to them as we make decisions. All right, great. Kate, anything else? Just besides the reminder that tomorrow at 5 p.m. is the student forum. I think everyone's received plenty of invites and everything to make sure that if you want to join and help out, the adults will help as taking notes on what we're hearing, things like that. The students, Asia will be running it. We have a whole bunch of students confirmed as moderators. I think it's going to be an exciting event. So if you can make it, definitely would love to see you there. Anything else, Kate, before we say goodbye?
So I know Joseph wanted to go through the schedule quickly and get approval on that. But also just mentioning that we put some thought into a public stakeholder forum to put out once and if approved by PGCPS, to gather public input along throughout the process and not just in these forum event, these engagement events. So we just wanted to get anyone's thoughts on whether that was something that you thought was worthwhile. And then I think Joseph's going to put up the schedule for the process and see if anyone has any comments on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think I saw most work group members have spent some time in there seeing which date where your session falls in the date. And, of course, if we do find we run into any PGCPS system-wide conflicts, we can certainly be flexible if we find that. But right now we're sort of trying to get this into everyone's calendars and start inviting guest speakers.
Yes, so here is the draft schedule as of now. It's intended to be somewhat of a living document because things will come up, but our next meeting is definitely scheduled for June 23rd. Our topic will be environmental justice, and Alvita and I will be working on it together. And also I had two other housekeeping things. We are still working on, and we were talking with Valerie about how best to approach a request for information. And it looks like we're going to sort of come up with our, kind of do it iteratively. So anyone who had information that they needed, just get in touch with me and we will work on that over the next month. And I also plan on putting together a document so we can start compiling resources as well that could be useful, as there's all kinds of reports. I know I just saw one from Clean Schools the other day about HVAC systems, for instance. So just having that information at our fingertips as we go along. And that's just all the other housekeeping I had. So yes, June 23rd is our next meeting. And I'll turn it over to Pamela to close this out.
All right. Well, again, thank you to all of our presenters on legislation and all the great questions and discussion. I am, really looking forward to our next steps and bringing this all together. I really think learning from the county commission definitely will help us, I think, save some time in our structure and movement forward. So I'm really grateful to them being a couple months ahead of us. And I do appreciate how the county has really recognized that PGCPS can, that we as a body can do our work internally and then bring that to the county. So I really appreciate that. But with that, I just, want to wish everyone a great rest of your day. And I hope to see some of you tomorrow during the student forum.
Thank you.
Take care.